I want to get. Caution. I do. I have to go and ask you.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say, you needed more medical problems this year, because there wasn't enough going on. You know, I needed a couple more to get in for the end of the year, just to make sure to round it out. Second half is looking too easy.
It's great. Talk a little bit about that tonight. But you're getting, to get the.
Yeah.
More further, I don't. Sure, you three next one. They got one.
Jim, I figured out where you're gonna be on.
Where's that? All right.
From Jeff Callahan's.
Oh, yeah.
Hang on. Hey, it's on his schedule. It may not be, but it's probably on his schedule as a.
So I will,
Yeah, it says regrets. Yeah. That's right. I was at work yesterday. I'm like, oh.
That's why.
Makes sense.
Well, guy, he set it all up there for years.
Yeah. That's cool.
Oh, it's so much
You'll
fun.
be right for that one.
we got a minute.
Some of me, some of it's the app. Yeah.
Where you playing? Every year.
Wi-Fi is.
It's welcome all.
No, it's not a secret.
It's super secret Wi-Fi.
Hold on.
You're letting him on the super secret?
You're letting Bob Colombo on a super secret Wi-Fi that's posted on the wall.
I don't know how. That's where I would always put right there. You can see your place. I was trying to FaceTime me right now. I don't. I know.
Who's trying?
Justice.
Oh, no.
All right, well, I think the mayor's, are you still trying to get in, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I've read the thing, but I don't know where.
Okay, all right, well. All right, so, okay, it's 6 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. It's a joint meeting, so.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Adeline for providing this nice space and the setup tonight, and how comfortable it is in here.
Don't do that.
I told you I would not say anything about it.
Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone to this joint discussion about mitigation efforts and ways to work together for the Sucker Brook corridor between the city and the towns, city and town of Canandaigua. But before we start, I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flags over here.
Flag is over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, since this is a public meeting and it was an advertised meeting, I will be asking, we have our clerk here tonight who will be keeping track of things for us. So Chris Flynn, was the meeting properly advertised?
Yes, it was.
And would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember John Casey,
Present.
Councilmember Terrence Fennelly,
Present.
Councilmember Adeline Rudolph,
Present.
Councilmember David Sauter,
David is necessarily absent.
Supervisor Jared Simpson,
Present.
City Manager John Goodwin,
Here.
Mayor Bob Colombo,
Here.
Councilmember Doug Merrill,
Here.
Councilmember Steve Rubing,
Here.
Councilmember Ellen Palomini,
Here.
Councilmember Dan Unrath,
Here.
sorry. Councilmember Karen White,
Here.
Councilmember Sim Covington, Councilmember Thomas Lyon.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. We do have a privilege of the floor. We'll have one at the start and we'll have one at the end, as it is a public meeting. So I don't, Our rules of procedure are typically 3 minutes. I don't know if yours are the same, so we can roll with it. Was there anyone who would like to be heard at this time? For the first privilege of the floor. Seeing no hands online. Priority business for tonight is a joint meeting, that this has been a while in discussion, and it's a joint meeting between the town of Canandaigua and the city of Canandaigua. I do have to, a while prior to this meeting, the mayor and I met and we were brainstorming ideas. And some of our brainstorming and ideas kind of got construed as already decided on plans and procedures and things that we were gonna have going forward. And that was the furthest thing from the case. So as we go through, and the items that are on the agenda are just a starting point for discussion. And there is, there's one person from each of us from each board. We can't make decisions like that anyhow. So I just wanted to make that clear, so people think that if there's any decisions already made, the point of tonight is to discuss. And because the point of tonight is to discuss, the first thing that we will do is we've been asked to tackle the charge of this group first. But before we do that, I'm gonna throw another curveball in here, and we have Kevin Mulvaney, who is the watershed manager, who knows more about this than most everybody in the room. He studies this. This is his life, mud and water and runoff and drainage. So we've asked Kevin to come in and kind of highlight some of the areas, highlight some of the projects, some of the issues that will then guide our discussion.
Thanks, everybody. It's tough when I'm talking to you guys, I'll kind of try to turn this way a little bit.
It's all my fault. I'm sorry.
I never did mention that. This was obviously an extreme storm event. And we'll go through some of the numbers on that. And I'm not going to redo the presentation that I gave to City Council, the Environmental Committee in full, but I just pulled out a few slides from that just to kind of go through. And it's on the city's website, correct? In terms of being able to view that aspect, so we can make sure that's available for folks to be able to look at. But just some highlights about Sucker Brook. So up on the screen over here, just to remember, it's roughly almost 5,600 acres in size in terms of the drainage area. So that red line that's going around on the map on the left side is the drainage area boundary. So a drop of water that lands on the inside of that red polygon, if you will, that water will end up going through Sucker Brook and work its way down into Lake. The brook starts out in the down the Bliss Hickox area in the southern end, in that area 21 to the right of it, in that area, and then it works its way north, crossing County Road 32. Crossing State Route 5 and 20, working its way north still to County Road 30. Then it turns kind of right by the Civic Center, turns south, and then works its way through Out of House Park, and then makes its way down through the city to the lake. There's also branches of Sucker Brook to remember. There's branches that are also crossing many of those same roadways. Then we have we'll call it the East Branch of Sucker Brook. That originates up in the Pactive area, flows underneath the Canandaigua Winery, now owned by Gallo, underneath Buffalo Street, then ultimately underneath the elementary school, primary school area, and connects in right north of West Gibson Street. And then that's forming, the full flow at that point through the city of Canandaigua area. The one thing also, when you look at that map, we call it a very dendritic stream pattern, which means it's got a lot of branches. So when you put a lot of rainfall in the system, it's got a very efficient conveyance system to bring all that flow into Sucker Brook very quickly into the main branch. So it's not like a long single strand of a stream system. It's got all these flow points that are connected together ultimately as it enters the city. Back in the mid 2000s, actually, then Superintendent Ewing, we've got Lou Loy here, and others who were involved from the town of Canandaigua. We obtained a state grant and put together and the town was heavily involved in this, put together a hydrologic model using MRB Group as the design engineer to really lay out kind of the flow patterns, the peak flow rates of Sucker Brook. And we actually broke up Sucker Brook, and we actually provided an intern to MRB, and they went out and did a lot of field work and figured out peak flow rates, figured out a lot of things about Sucker Brook in terms of constraint points, in terms of the structures, the bridges, the culverts. We looked at a lot of those kind of things, but broke it down into 56 sub-watershed areas within Sucker Brook in terms of distinct drainage patterns. There's about 23 miles of stream length. So maybe you own a house right along Sucker Brook in the city, that might be 200 feet of stream length. Well, there's 23 miles of stream length when you add it all up. And it's truly a mix of land cover in terms of agriculture, forest land, urban corridor, obviously in the city of Canandaigua, and wetland systems. And those wetland systems are key. And that's what we're really trying to do, is find more of these wetland systems, build more of these systems. And I think, the projects that we've done really have worked very well over the years. And I think even worked during this storm event. We'll see a couple of those pictures, but obviously the storm that came through was tremendous. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this is, I'll try to go quicker through these slides, I promise, but so there's a lot of data here. This is the Northeast Climate Center from Cornell University, showing extreme precipitation estimates for our area. So if you see that red dot that's right in the middle of the city of Canandaigua, that basically you pick a point on the map, and they've got the ability to kind of tell us, all right, what should we expect in terms of extreme storms? So I highlighted kind of the 3-hour storm event because it was roughly the most, the major portion of the storm was about 3 hours in length. Actually 45 minutes, it was crazy, 4 inches of rain up at the airport. But 3 hours, 2.5 inches of rain, which is really what the city portion of Sucker Brook actually got, was about 2.5 inches plus or minus a couple tenths, is equal to about a 25-year storm event. And then when you look at what happened in the town of Canandaigua, based on a couple different rain gauges, one at the airport and then one in the County Road 32 area, we had anywhere from 5.2 to 5.8 inches of rain in that 3-hour period, with about 4 inches of that occurring in about a 45-minute period to about an hour. So that's basically off the chart, if you will, literally. In terms of beyond the 500-year storm event, when you look at this aspect. So when we do development sites, new development, they usually are designed for the 100-year storm event. And that's the 24-hour storm event. Over a 24-hour period, when you look at that, it's about 5.2, 5.3 inches in a 24-hour rain event. Well, we got all of that and more in about 3 hours. So it's just important to remember the magnitude of what happened on July 9th. And keep that into context and look at that. But the next slide kind of also tells an important story. If you could, thank you, appreciate it. Is we're probably going to see more of these kind of storms. Hopefully not the 5.8 inches, but hope is a beautiful thing. But we also have to plan, right? We have to think, and we have to really build in resiliency wherever we possibly can, because these storms. Maybe it's the 25-year storm length, which creates flooding issues, in the city of Canandaigua and some portions of the town. We have to think about these things because they're probably, based on the research and everything else that we're seeing, is going to happen more often. So next slide, please. Just a quick design here of kind of something to remember from the DEC floodplain training module, is we have to remember that floodplains are a natural part of every stream system. Stream system that can be 20 acres in size in terms of drainage area to, the Nile River. They all have floodplains. So some are mapped, some are regulatory floodplains, some are mapped, but all streams have floodplains. And typically what we see is on storm events that are above a 2-year storm event intensity, streams get out of their banks and want to get into their floodplains. And floodplains are awesome from a water quality perspective, typically when they're forested or wetland systems right by it, because they provide huge filtration systems. We did a lot of that kind of work down in the Naples area, where we reintroduced the stream system to its floodplain because it had all been bermed up over time. So we did some strategic berm breaks to do that, to get the stream back into its floodplain for water quality treatment. So streams have floodplains, and it's what we put in those floodplains that begins to really kind of, create more and more of the issues, exacerbates those issues. But we are where we are. We have to understand that there's a lot of development in the floodplain, and we have to think about, all right, can we build resiliency to reduce the magnitude and intensity of these storm events? So next slide. So what happened on July 9th? Just a couple quick pictures. I don't want to go through a lot of them. There's a huge amount of them out there, but the picture on the left is Happiness House area and the impacts there in the town of Canandaigua and the impacts there. The one on the right is of West Gibson Street from Maria Bucci's house. And it's basically looking at the flood water is really mimicking the floodplain and the floodway pretty well in terms of our map system. So that's the bridge structures in the foreground there. Obviously getting completely overwhelmed. You can see the flow going through Mrs. Chavez's place on that area right in through there also. So on the south side of Sucker Brook, or south side of West Gibson. So it's just, trying to remember, that these things, what happened that night. So the next picture. This is out just down the road from here, quite honestly. This is so the town hall is in the foreground of this picture. And this is the bypass, 5 and 20 in the bypass intersection area, where that's a car that's halfway inundated with water in that area for the exit ramp in that area. So that gives you a sense. Remember this picture because there's an opportunity area that I think we need to revisit for potential storage that's just upstream of this system. So yeah, the next picture, please. So this picture is of County Road 30, and it's upstream of our big flood retention area that we have on County Road 30. And that red dot in the lower right corner, I'll tell you kind of where it is on County Road 30 in terms of where I took this picture. But you can see the cars and the trucks are turning around because water is overtopping County Road 30, probably 400 or 500 feet wide in terms of the water going over County Road 30 before it makes the big turn to the south. So, and then the next picture, and this is the other side a little bit later in the evening of the Happiness House area in terms of its inundation in that area. So then the next picture is taken at about 5:30 the next morning. And this is right at our entry point of the County Road 30 project that we built back in 2018, I think, Jim, somewhere in that range. It was fall of 2018, summer, fall. What this picture is telling us, so what happens here is we're looking upstream, the water's coming at us. This is our flow routing point to get water out of, a portion of the water out of the stream and into our 18-acre flood storage area. But if you look on the right side of that picture, and you do some kind of measuring off the tree height, you can see the water elevation that was coming through this system was about 4 or 5 feet higher than what it is in this picture the next morning, which is still, this water is cranking. This is a big storm event typically. When we see this level of flow come through, typically this is a pretty big storm event for our storage system. It's 4 feet higher at the peak of that storm coming through, and figure out the width of that. The magnitude of the water that was coming through this system was just tremendous. And it helps calibrate to that 500-year storm. So next slide. Here's some other pictures that's important to look at both, and some things we got to think about from a mitigation standpoint, emergency measures standpoint. This is Woodlawn Cemetery taken about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is bedload material that was never there before. This stream has filled in with the amount of erosion and bedload material that's filled in this whole stream system that's at like 1/10 of its capacity. So we got to get that material out of there. I've been talking to Doug Stone. We've got DEC coming out on Friday morning to look at this, to give us hopefully emergency permit authorization. And we just got to figure out that we got to get this material out of there because it can move downstream and create flooding issues. It's going to create flooding issues and erosion issues in the cemetery area. So next picture. Here's another one where we got, it's one of their parking and drive lanes on the right-hand side of that picture, but this is the massive erosion that occurred in that area and also the bed load in Sucker Brook from this area. This was never there before. This erosion was never not there. So this is important because this stuff is going to continue to migrate downstream and fill in the stream system there. So then the next picture, we're also going to be meeting with Mike McLean from the school on Friday because there is some pretty bad bed load accumulation also in in Sucker Brook in this location as well, so we really want to get that out. And if any of the neighbors are aware of any bed load accumulation kind of in Sucker Brook from that West Gibson Street south, please let me know, and we, you know, we definitely want to get that on the list for potential project areas. So next slide. So here's just, I want to go through real quick some of the things that we have done, and this is just an abridged version of a lot of the projects we did over the years. Actually, the town of Canandaigua really built this project. I think it was one of the first ones, maybe Jim, you helped out with over the years. And you know, I know my name's mentioned in that resolution. Quite honestly, my name should be replaced in large part by Jim Fletcher, who's been a huge resource in helping to build these partnership type projects over the years. This is one that was done about 400 feet of stream bank stabilization, increasing the capacity of the stream. This is north of Parish Street on the other side of 80 Parish Street, where trees were falling into the stream. It was really bad situation in here. We were able to go in and pull that bank back, increase capacity, stabilize it. And I looked at this thing after the storm and it held off, and it did exactly what we expected it to do. So the next picture. This is one, the city put in this stabilization in through here. There was major erosion. I should have a before picture on this thing, where people were losing yards, major part of their yard system. And this was right after the storm. I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks I took this picture. You see the logs still sitting up there, but this also helped. So these projects were doing their job to not, you know, create huge debris jams and those kind of things, and really try to maintain the capacity of the stream system. The next slide. Here's some of the other things that we've done. The town and the city partnered on this project. This actually took stormwater runoff from Arlington Park development, and it used to go through right by the Civic Center, a very small little detention basin that did nothing. And this actually takes the city stormwater runoff, puts it onto town land, and we built a basin between the city. Lou was involved, and Jim, in helping to get this built with the Civic Center, and I think we brought in Fuller was involved. So it was, you know, a combined effort type project. Next slide. So then this is, I didn't get a picture because it was too dangerous, quite honestly, to be out there and of the night of that storm, but it filled and it actually overtopped in terms of capacity, in terms of the County Road 30 project. But this shows you the magnitude of the storage area that we have. This is about 18 to 19 acres of flood storage, about 4 feet in depth on this project site. This is October 21, where this storm came through. It was a really big storm, and this thing functioned, and I think really helped downstream in terms of reducing any type of impacts that were occurring downstream. So these are the types of things we built, but we want to build more of them. So we think mitigation, we think FEMA funding. This is the kind of stuff we're looking for. So next picture. Here's, and we got a video on this one, but this is the one on Dave Sauter's property, actually, where this flow used to come through. And this is about 1,500 acres of drainage area coming down through, and it would overtop this area and keep on going down Sucker Brook. So the next slide shows you, and there's a quick video here, but what it does is it's taking that excess water that used to keep on going down Sucker Brook, and it routes it into a big, huge wetland system. We could try it, yeah, see if it works. So, yeah, so that water is coming, you know, probably 30 to 40% of the peak flows are being diverted and conveyed through this system. And it's being sent out into this big wetland system that's about 25 acres in size for storage. So we're reusing and really utilizing that wetland system. That was one Mrs. Policini actually donated about 25 to 27 acres of a conservation easement for us to be able to build that project. The town and the city helped build that together. That's, you know, part of this ongoing partnership that we've had over the years. So next slide. So this one is one Dr. Ewing probably remembers. We got flooded out a couple times, 17 classrooms, about a foot of water got into the primary school wing there, and, you know, caused some major damage. The two pictures down below was a partnership between the town of Canandaigua, the city, when Lou was there, Ontario County was heavily involved. We got a state grant. We kind of oversaw the project and built this 2-acre kind of multi-tiered wetland system. The next slide is I'm out there at like 5:30 in the morning and it held, you know, and I went there that night also and it held. We didn't get the flooding into that school system. Now, we only had about 2.5 inches of rain roughly in the city portion of this with the East Branch, if you will. So if we had the 5 inches, we're probably seeing issues here. But it's a 25-year storm event level intensity, and that system we built held. So next slide. So this is just a quick map of just remembering, you know, and I know the folks, especially in the city that understand this, that lived it literally. The floodplain and the floodway. So that hatched line going through is your floodway, where the flows are like the river during the 100-year storm event. And you can see some of the bigger areas in that Ellis Place area, the West Gibson area. Those two zones have some of the biggest floodways and floodplains. So, you know, those, and we saw that was like some of the biggest impact areas. We also know that because the bridge structures, quite honestly, and the MRB report shows this, that the West Gibson Street Bridge and the Chapin Street Bridge probably have our least capacity. So those are two bridges that we have to really look at, I think, closely to see, can we figure out grant funding to maybe increase the capacity of those, or just understand that those are some of our pinch points in that area. So next slide. A lot of numbers here, and I won't ask you to try to read that, Mayor Colombo, but you might be the only one, you're close enough. So, but what it's showing is, so this storm was unique because most of the rain hit the town portion of Sucker Brook subwatershed. But that yellow highlighted area is showing that the bridge at North Pearl, right there, right at Woodlawn, there's about 950 or so CFS during the 100-year storm event. If I got my numbers right, tell me if I'm wrong. Somewhere in that range. But then by the time you get down to Parish Street, the numbers basically double in terms of peak flow rates during the 100-year storm event. So you have those feeder streams coming in, but you also have a lot of urban runoff that comes during that type of storm event. So you have a lot of runoff that's generated within the city boundaries also that has to be recognized and understood, that we can't get all of our solution areas in the town of Canandaigua in terms of trying to get storage there, because there's a lot of runoff generated in the city portion as well. So next slide. I won't go through this number, but basically there's a lot here, but if we were going to try to reduce the peak flows that came through during that storm event, say by 25%, there's still major flooding. But if we were trying to reduce, we would need about a 500 cubic foot per second reduction in the flows coming through Sucker Brook. Well, how do we do that? Well, we got to find, there's a lot of numbers there. We got to find about 332 acre feet of storage. So what does that mean? That means a lot of our project areas, we can get typically 3 to 4 feet of storage during the peak volumes in terms of storage. So to reduce it by 25%, we need to look to try to find about another 100 acres of additional storage areas. This is a very simplistic model, but that's really the magnitude of what we're trying to do to try to solve that July 9th storm by reducing it by 25%. I shouldn't use the word solve. Try to mitigate it and reduce it somewhat. So that's what we're, you know, that's a heck of a goal, right? But that's what we're looking at. But when you look at the 25-year storm event, that would have major impacts in terms of reducing flooding issues down that area. So yeah, the next slide. You got a lot going on there. I appreciate it.
Yeah. She's a wizard with that.
That's very impressive. So these are just some quick things actually. Just kind of writing up, and we have to work on this a lot more, but what are some of the next steps we really need to think about? Well, the good thing about July 9th, if there's any one good thing, is the hazard mitigation funding that will be available to the town and the city of Canandaigua because of that disaster and all that happened in the eastern portion of the state, that we're going to be able to get state and federal funding if we work it the right way, to be able to do more of these kind of projects and really reach partnerships with the landowners throughout this whole system. So some of the key things, I think we really need to get in there, work with the school, work with the cemetery, and dredge out key areas of Sucker Brook where the bed loads have accumulated, because they're going to reduce capacity and increase flooding. We need to stabilize some of these major stream bank erosion issues because of potential for debris jams. And other things, and obviously from a water quality perspective, we don't want to see that either. Revisit some of the landowners of these proposed locations that have not been built. Some of the areas like the one where we saw the bypass flooding, that area just to the south of it, there's a key area that I think if we can revisit some of those landowners and really just talk to them and explain this connection, this important aspect, I think that's big. There's another one in that northwest area, that maybe we can work with those landowners and try to, peel off these peak flows as much as we possibly can. There's some pretty big acre feet of storage we can get in those two areas. Look at retrofitting some of our existing basins that we've built or in some of the development areas. Sometimes I hear, oh, it's gotta be that development that was put in, 10 years ago, that's what's causing the flooding issues downstream. No, it's a part, maybe a part of it, but they have to meet their pre-development peak flow rates have to match the post-development peak flow rates up to the 100-year storm event. When you get over a 100-year storm event, well, it lets loose. So maybe we should look at one, evaluating those systems, see if they're properly functioning, and then two, can we retrofit them? One, can we retrofit the old Brookside one to be able to store more water during these extreme events? Can we look at some of these areas to try to do that aspect? There's another one we were pretty close to building just north of the winery. And then there was a bankruptcy issue up in that area that didn't allow us to move that forward in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. Maybe there's time again to be able to do that, because that could be a big help also to the city, especially in the Buffalo Street area. I think evaluating key bridge structures, based on, some of the math that's been done. Identify new large landowners, I think, and we've had conversations with some of the large landowners that we haven't worked with previously, and we've had some good meetings with some of those folks, and we have to make sure these are win-win propositions. We have to show, that especially in the ag type situations, that we're minimizing ag disturbance, improving water quality, and really getting more flood resiliency in these areas. So looking at those kind of partnerships and trying to work together there. And then work with landowners in the floodplain system to try to build resiliency in their houses, on their houses, and a lot of that's going to be on their own, but maybe there's the opportunity potential for grant funding, low interest loans, things along those lines to help get stuff out of their basement area, if possible, and into less flood prone areas. So there's a lot within those. There's probably 20 sub bullet points for each one of those things that we can talk about, but this is, I try to do a quick overview, but it's tough for me sometimes, so I apologize, but just to try to kind of frame the discussion a little bit and go from there. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Any board of council members have any questions for Kevin before we go? Seems like Kevin did, most of our work is done. I think so. So I think we could make a motion to exit the meeting and put Kevin in charge. So
Somebody given.
I think there would be a vote on that. So I know that
Your one, Kevin, drawing it, or the slide you had up there, we had one in the package here at Sun out. Just doing roughly adding these all up, there's like 120 roughly acres altogether. The areas you showed in yellow.
Yes.
So you need to really, to get that 100 acres to reduce by 25%, you need pretty much all of them to
Yes, but there's
that's
other
without going
opportunities.
into some of the other areas and
Right.
maybe digging deeper or.
Yeah, so when you look at that map, there's definitely, and this is based on that old study. We actually, the one up on County Road 30, we actually built that bigger than kind of what it's showing there in terms of the amount of area. And then also for the one on Dave Sauter and Mrs. Policini's land, we actually got more storage out of that than from the 2007 study that this is based on. So yeah, and then there's some areas that, it might just be almost impossible to get, that agreement from the landowners. And then there's some other areas that I think we can definitely get.
Are there others though that, because this is not ancient, but it's a few years old.
Yeah.
Are there other areas that have come into play perhaps, or could come into play?
Yeah, I don't, could you bring up the PowerPoint slideshow again? We can maybe just. So when I'm usually, I like to like hit the screen and show you this, that, or have a laser pointer. I don't have that one. So that's right. All right, why not? All right. Wasn't sure with the microphone, but.
Bring it.
So.
It's not touch screen, so you're not gonna do anything
Okay,
crazy
good.
with it. Yeah, it's not a touch.
So this one I think would be a great project to look at, you know. That's got about 17 acres and there's some different landowners there. I think there's some of land with probably 3 or 4. It's really easy project. Literally it's building a berm right here. And you can just back that water up during the storm event. I mean, obviously the base flows through. It's a wetland system, so you want to do that again. So this is County Road 32, 5 and 20. So you got the bypass right here, so it's in this general area. So again, reaching out to the 3 landowners, I think 2 of which I think were on board conceptually previously, and you know, this one in here. And I don't want to get, you know, this is people's private land. So it's their land. And that's what we got to figure out is how we connect with them and make that partnership happen. You know, we think there's some opportunities like this one up here that's taking the drainage through here behind the winery. I think that's a big one that would go in through there. You know, I think there's some potential in this section where I think there's some nice partnership potentials in this area to work in that system. You know, then, you know, maybe, and then this one right in here, this is one really, again, we could just build a berm literally right here and the water would back into this existing wetland system when we want it to. So there's, and then, you know, like, so this pond right here, say for Old Brookside, can we increase the height of this? Can we reduce the you know, without impacting the development site, you know, can we enhance the storage on this one? We also, so with the town, we worked out it and we had state grant funding help provide this little feeder one right here. Morel Development built in here, but one of the things that the town was able to work in, and we worked with them on this, we got 100-foot buffer zone of native plantings all the way along this stream corridor right here. And this system back in here is permanently protected in this area. So that's something that's not on this map, but that's something the town was able to accomplish in that area.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Question, if we, you mentioned the pinch points of Chapin and West Gibson, if you open those up, does that create a problem farther down the road now? I'm just bringing that up, that if we're going, you know, trying to get money, FEMA money or something, we look at the whole stream instead of just opening up to then cause problems.
Right, so Parish Street, if you, and I didn't get the numbers to you from that report. But Parish Street, Bristol Street, and Clark Street all have good capacity on those systems. It's just that West Gibson and that Chapin one just are a little bit smaller, and it's enough to create, you know, some of these issues. You know, and maybe the infrastructure, it's gonna be too difficult based on the road system height, you know, the utilities and stuff like that to see if that's gonna be plausible or not. But I think it's worthwhile looking at it and seeing, can we do that? The West Ave Bridge was replaced, but they also had to look at the Chapin Bridge to make sure there was not gonna be an impact there. So we have to strategically look at these, you know, as a holistic aspect. Thank you.
Is the stream bed itself through the city, those areas you mentioned, is there a lot of loading in them now? I mean, it was there when this event occurred, or?
Not prior to
did
the
they-
event.
Okay.
Yeah, that material was
They're fairly
literally like
clean.
Dougstone, yeah, who
It
runs
just
this,
brought it.
yeah, it literally eroded the banks, it brought the stream bed down further. Yeah, so there's eroded issues upstream a little bit from that, but this magnitude of material in there is gonna create problems. Just really exacerbate stream bank erosion issues, flooding issues, so.
But really, that whole channel needs to be cleaned out.
I wouldn't say the whole channel. I think there's, you know, one of the things you gotta look at is the inverts of the bridges. Right, and say, all right, well, it doesn't really make sense to dig below the inverts of those bridges because it's just gonna fill back in very quickly to kind of match that channel slope. So really, those are your kind of your baselines you wanna work off of, and strategically, there might be some stuff, you know, all the way down to Parish. But by and large, it looks like it's Because what happened is like, there's like a change of slope. So all of a sudden you start, your slope say is 3, 4, 5% through the cemetery, but then it's the bottom part of the cemetery flattens out, the heavier stuff drops out first.
I have a question for you, Kevin.
Yes,
So we're talking about all this movement of the sediment and the erosion that's taking place along Sucker Brook. Much of this then must be depositing itself right at the mouth of, or the tail, whatever you want to call
Right.
it, the mouth or the tail of Sucker Brook at the lake.
Yeah.
Am I accurate when I say that?
oh, that plume going out into the lake was tremendous for days, yeah.
So
and-
does that mean at some point there's going to need to be some dredging? There
Yeah,
at that point?
I think, one of the things, and that's an interesting question that's been brought up from time to time in terms of the state boat launch area and the channel going out. I think that's not gonna be a one storm event creation. It's a chronic issue that builds up over time. And that's a state boat launch and a state boat channel going out, so I may sound a little biased in terms of what I think might be responsible to maintain that channel. But we did do a dredge project, actually, the town, the city, the county, the landfill was involved when it was county-owned landfill back in 2002, 2003 timeframe, where we dredged between the bypass bridge and Parish Street. That was one of my first projects that I kind of coordinated, and that was like, and I didn't put that one in the slideshow, but we pulled out like 6 million pounds of material and 285 truckloads, because that literally had built up so much, it was potentially backing water up. So that's 20 or so years ago now, so that might, I don't think it's ready yet that we have to do it, but it's something that we may want to be watching and seeing, how much more we want to see build up in there.
What I'm hearing you say, it's not accumulated to the level it was when you got here in 2002 or 2003, whatever that date was.
Well, we dredged that out,
Yeah, but we're working our way there. That's
Yeah,
what you're
I think
doing,
so.
right?
Yeah.
It's pretty big catch basin.
It is, yeah. It was artificially widened in the 80s by the landowner illegally, so it was doubled in width in that area. So all of a sudden, say the stream flow rate is 7-8 feet per second, then it hits this wide spot and drops to 3 feet per second. Well, physics tells us it's gonna drop out material, so.
So if I'm,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm just summarizing, if I were to summarize your most important immediate things we can do. Is look for ways to retrofit, because we already have it. Stabilize. Because that's gonna make, it shows that made a big impact. And then dredging the areas that we can, I think those are things that we can tackle right now, but we still need to identify. Moving forward, Tom?
Well, sort of building on
There
what
you go.
you're just kind of talking about, I was just gonna ask, it sounds like there's a really good relationship, city, town, your office, county, so what can we as elected officials do to help lead that? And you were kind of summarizing what seems to be the case there. Is there something more that we can do for a meeting to talk about, a task force or something like that?
Right.
Is that the best route, or is going through this list of?
Yeah, I don't know. I really, and again, yeah, I did a presentation, but there's a lot of really important people in this audience right now that have a huge amount of knowledge on this system. Jim Fletcher, MRB Group, Jim Sprague from the city, and some of the folks there, in terms of the current personnel that's involved. And then, the residents definitely, so my take is we really should set up formal feedback loops back to the city and the town, updates. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing. It's budget season. We really need to think about, building, a pocketbook. So that's one of the things to remember is town and the city commingled funds, and there's still money available in that commingled funds in the town's coffers to do more work. The city put in 175, the town put in 150, but this town's got maintenance responsibility, 150,000, 175,000, to get these land areas acquired and to do some of the work. And then it was 50-50 state grant funding that we were able to obtain to get that, to do some of these projects that we've done. So there's still money available there, and that's a great local match source that we have ready to go. And it's really ready, the FEMA meetings are coming up. Jim and the town crew are gonna be, and I'll help them, you know, meet with the FEMA folks about mitigation potential. And then the city's gonna be doing the same thing, so we really just gotta make sure we got our inventory set up the right way in terms of the projects we really wanna see happen. Push the envelope as much as possible with FEMA. And we can help do that, you know, and see what, you know, FEMA's. You know, their pocketbook, we gotta figure out how open is it, you know, and what are they willing to fund, and I don't know if we really have a great answer on that yet, you know, they're saying yes to mitigation, but. Let's really find out what they think about some of our mitigation opportunities.
If I can add too, we also have the countywide mitigation study that we had a presentation on a week or so ago at the last board supervisors meeting. We can identify projects.
Right.
And we can go through more steps, and that's more money that's available. And it's grant money that this crew, I'm drawing a blank on their name, that did the presentation, but that they can help follow these steps and open the door for more funding available.
Yeah.
If we're willing to go down and take these steps. So that's something else for more funding to come in.
Yeah. If it's mentioned in a plan, right, it's a planner, right?
If it's
It
mentioned
helps.
in a plan, it helps to get
Yes.
money
Yes.
from the man. or-
Kevin, are we typically acquiring easements to do this work or purchasing land? You know, what is the cost beyond the cost to actually build whatever the systems?
Yeah, so the County Road 30 project was a purchase of land, 2 different parcels, purchased the actual land, full ownership to the town of Canandaigua. The 5 and 20 project was donated easements, so we literally, it was almost night and day on the negotiation aspect of it. I met with Mrs. Policini, I think Doug was there. And literally, I think it was a 4 or 5 minute conversation. It was, hey, here's what we're looking to do, you know, what do you think? Sure, you can do it, absolutely. You know, to lots of negotiations with the 2 landowners with County Road 30, so I guess one way to put it. And we got there, but it was a process to figure out, you know, what they're willing to sell it for and what was gonna work. And quite honestly, one of the innovative things I think we did with it was on one of the properties, we said, all right, there's future development potential in the area we're not buying. So one of the enticements was, hey, if we build this thing, we can at least, because it's way bigger than what they would need for their stormwater management, we can take the quantity portion in this basin. And you still have to do your quality aspect, rain gardens, those kind of things, but we can handle the quantity. So that was a reduction, and it actually lowered the price of the purchase as well to bring that down. So I like easements a little bit more. And I think the thing is just connecting with the assessor to make sure that our easement valuations really showcase, you know, the reduced value, and it's got to be at, or, and I think definitely below the ag assessment exemptions to make sure, like in the ag portions, that we can show, hey, here's another carrot, if you will, that we can bring the valuation below even the ag exemptions. And I think that's completely legitimate because we're removing development rights, we're removing potentially agricultural, you know, use of the land. And there needs to be compensation back to the landowner for that aspect. I think that's the only way to really approach these things. Some places, you know, where there's just, the land trust could play a role here. I met with the land trust last week to talk about these concepts, and they're very interested. They are fine with the ask. They usually like the big showcase projects, right? Big land, forested areas. But they were completely on board with the idea of, okay, if we can showcase a water quality project with it, we'll do some of these smaller ones with it. So, so that's, yeah, I think there's, you know, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle to pull it together. And there's a lot of players involved that play a huge role.
Some of the mitigation is in focus, of course, but some of the slides we had showed areas that still need to be cleaned up. And that money that we talked to Doug this morning, how much is left in that? About 150 grand or something like that, 125. Some of that money be tapped to help with that cleanup.
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest, I love to borrow from Jim, and Jim's and you know, that could be something where, you know, if it works within, you know, the system, and maybe a town city, you know, aspect, where we can, you know, maybe use one of the larger excavators to be able to, get, because the one in the cemetery. You need the 210 or the 160, quite honestly, and you need, the 5-foot bucket to get what's in there to have make any headway. So it really, I think maybe it's existing resources, getting the material out of there. And then there's stone work maybe potentially that, we can do in there also and either purchase or use some of the existing stock that Jim collects. So I'm speaking for Jim and I'm hoping he's agreeing.
Not saying no.
That's right.
You can tell by the shade of red.
Can you use the
Beer
back-
after, but
That's just all on board, Brad.
That's it.
But I mean, that has to be done. I mean, God forbid if there's another incident like what we
next
had,
week?
you've got all that on the ground. That's gonna help.
Right.
So,
So, and understandably so, the DEC wants to, grant that permit. And hopefully we built enough of a track record with them that they'll make it happen quickly. And then we can figure out, maybe it's a combination of how do we do this? I look at some places like Woodlawn. Yeah, it's private, but it's a community, aspect. And it's open to the public for walking. It's all those kind of things. So it's a little different animal than somebody's private backyard. And then in those areas, we still may want to do something, but maybe we got to really look at, and it's always subjective to a certain extent, but what's that benefit ratio? Is the private landowner really benefiting? We're getting a little bit out of it. Then we got to look at, payment and stuff like that. So.
well, your direction that you had up there about reducing by 25%.
Yeah.
Is that something that should be taken as the charge to this group that?
Literally,
or is there something beyond that, or is it?
Let's think about that one a little bit, in terms of, I think we should have lofty goals. I think that's but there's a little bit, that's a quick math problem. There's more engineering and hydraulics that has to be looked at to really figure out those connection points. And we can look at MRB study. We may want to re-engage with MRB on some of these things, which I think would be a wise move as the town engineer. We got a lot of the experience here. So there's a connection point there, to look at these things a little bit, but I like lofty goals. I like that, that 100 acres, it's a round number, but it's, 100 acres, 300 acre feet. I think it's sometimes goals that are not maybe truly attainable aren't the worst thing in the world because, it's pushing it. So,
It's a goal.
yeah.
Maybe a stretch goal, but
Right.
that's. Yeah, great. Well, Jared said earlier, something, I think at the beginning of the meeting, that sounds like everything's heading in the right direction, so we're good.
Yeah, it's all good.
Go
You-
for it, Kevin. Go
No.
do it.
The people that have been working on this together from the city and the town.
Yeah.
And you, to me, that's a group that should be,
Yeah.
tip of the spear going forward.
So Karen, Ellen, Karen and Ellen.
Is there any retroactive responsibility or potential partnership for analysis or funding from the development that's taken place in this in the town and along this stream bank?
I guess, well, it's where do we end and where do we start on that one? There's many, many layers to that onion, right? So I guess what I would argue back is I think the city and I think the town does a very good job when you look at across the landscape of plan reviews, of engineering reviews, of doing the proper analysis to make sure these development projects are built the right way. So I think all the development aspects have met our goals and our requirements. Maybe it's a regulatory thing you gotta think about in terms of, do we wanna change? And maybe there's some incentive in there, but do we want to look at ways to ramp up the requirements? And think about, maybe it's not the 24-hour storm we look at anymore, we look at the 3-hour storm, which actually generates more runoff, on these flash type situations. So maybe we have to think from a zoning and a regulatory perspective, how we regulate, what our bars are for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Kevin to help me out with this because he remembers the dates far better than I do. But when we first started working with some of the major mitigation that took place, it was a result of flood. And I remember Maria was impacted by that flood. What year was it? Around 20,
Well, we had several, you
well,
know,
but there was one.
2011 was a
11.
FEMA event,
Yes.
FEMA disaster declaration. 2014, we had one. 2017, I think, was a pretty substantial
Right.
flood
But we
event.
started around
Yeah.
2011 with the whole mitigation.
We started studying and
Yes.
looking at some of these things. We
Getting
started
the
really,
properties involved and so on.
Yeah.
And then each year it would, we'd get more. And then eventually we ended up over near the park, Outhouse Park, and did a lot of work along there too.
Yep.
In terms of creating some foliage and things like that. And I think with each one, there tended to be an improvement. But certainly not anything that would be able to handle the situation we had back in July. And Maria's here, and I hope she doesn't mind me asking, but I remember there was a problem. The one before this, where he had a real problem. Do you remember what year that was?
Well, the year that we got the remnants of the hurricane that the flooding that hit the school.
Right,
Yeah, the whole street was flooded, but we had a couple, we were able to get some good sump pumps that helped pump everybody out.
right,
But since the project at the school, for a few years, we didn't have issues, but
right.
now what we're seeing is different and,
So there
Yeah.
has been some improvement
Yeah.
up until this horrendous event. And I have to credit Kevin and Mr. Fletcher and Lou Loy and all of the people who worked, that really got out there and understood what was going on and then brought it to the elected officials. And we endorsed it and we oversaw it and we came up with funds if we needed them. And I think going in that same direction after what Kevin has said here tonight, that makes good sense. I think that sometimes as elected officials, we tend to try and get too involved in terms of the nitty gritty of what's being done. And we have to leave it to the people who know what they're doing.
I completely agree with you there.
I'll say. Mr. Merrill?
Yes. I'm gonna pile on behind Ellen. Every time I listen to one of your presentations, I learn something important about this, Kevin. You do such a great job at summarizing what's going on. I like this slide. I like the title, Next Steps, because clearly you've given some thought to where we should be going to address some of these issues. There are 7 bullets on that slide. And as I've been looking at them, I've thought about all the different ways that you could have organized those bullets. Most expensive to least expensive, hardest to easiest. What would it take for you and whatever team you would put together to organize that along the lines of most impactful to least impactful? The ones that give us the biggest bang for the buck, that get us closest to where we want to be, to the ones that if we have time, if we have money, it'd be nice to do it. What would it take for you to give us a list like that?
I think we have a lot of that information already. When we did some of the previous studies, we know, what we can get out of some of these things. To do that, I think we're going to that next level. We can do some of that analysis, but quite honestly, some of it's a labor, a time commitment and everything else. That's where we really would need to bring in a consultant, probably MRB group, quite honestly, to help, formalize some of the calculations on those things. But I think we got a good initial prioritization to really kind of go after at this point, in terms of those areas. The biggest variable that comes into play on all these things is, are we gonna get landowner agreement? Because 99% of this stuff is on private land. So we can do all the evaluation and prioritization we want and say, well, we just spent a year trying to do all that. Well, the top 5, those landowners are like, no, we're not interested. And they have that right. So I really think, maybe it's the way my brain works, I don't know, but I'm a little bit chaos theory where I like throwing a lot of balls in the air and kind of, really trying to see how each of those are working. And, making calls and seeing, okay, can we go momentum on this one? Is there interest? Oh, this landowner's on board, yes. A lot of these all have good tangible impacts. That's why they're on the slideshow. They really have those. So, some of them, we're doing more evaluation, quite honestly. We're working with a landowner that owns a lot of land or rents a lot of land, and it gets complex. But we have some concept designs there that I'm not comfortable putting out there, because we have to get buy-in, we have to get trust, we have to build that. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So it's really kind of looking at and seeing, all right, can we build something here? So that's what we're trying to do, is find those connection points and those relationships. Like I can find you 100 spots where we can store water. It's, can we get the landowner commitment, and I think we've done a bunch of those prioritizations. I think Jim and I, we talk a lot about these kind of things. We look at, where is it gonna work? We'll bring in MRB. We do a lot of that kind of stuff. We will be refining as we move forward. And when we're presenting something to the city council and town board for action, we've prioritized that, because we've really gone through and said, yes, this one makes the most sense, and we're getting commitment as well.
That's the answer to the question that was after. To follow up with Ellen said, at what point do we come in to help? But
Yeah.
Let's get out of your way until you can come back to us with a plan.
Well, I think we got a decent plan. I think it's, implementing the plan, having the resources to implement this plan. And this plan's gonna evolve. We can plan as, all day long, but I think it's really, let's implement, let's experiment. Let's see what we can get in terms of success stories here. Let's reach out to these landowners that we've identified a bunch of land areas that we want to work on. Let's try to get those done. We also have other options that we're really trying to push and explore as well, and see if we can get something done there. So, I'd love to do a master plan and be able to say, yep, do this one, I don't care, eminent domain, whatever it takes, let's get this land. Well, that's not gonna work, right? All of a sudden, it's gonna be lawsuits, it's gonna be, real problems. And philosophically, I don't think most of the folks here, myself included, think that's the right move as our first. Like, if there's a dire situation where it's make or break, we need that land, or else it's gonna be flooding downstream for sure, that might be a different story. We're really trying to push all these different options and really trying to figure it out. Because at the end of the day, we could build all of this and we could reduce that by 25%. And we're still gonna, that storm still would have had major flooding issues through Sucker Brook. That's the tough part of this. It's really that sweet spot of the 10-year to say 50-year storm, where we're gonna see more often. Take a zero off those, probably 1 to 5 years really. Those are the storms we're really trying to affect the change.
Is there any, part of what you're saying, Kevin, is some of that dependent on the results of meeting with FEMA, what they may be able to help out, so that you'd have some ammunition in the form of greenbacks, dollars,
right,
to help approach these people. So you really need to get past some of that.
Yeah, I think the first meeting's the 28th, I think.
Yeah, we meet Thursday.
Yeah. So that's sort of that first meeting to get a better sense of, all right, what's their formula for success? So we may have our own formula, but they may say, well, that's nice. We're the federal government, we're gonna do it our way.
So deeper package.
Yes, so that's what we have to adapt to a little bit and figure out, okay, all right, plan B, plan C. But I think Jim's knowledge of this drainage system, my knowledge, and and others that are out there. And really it's that relationship and knowing the landowners. And trying to figure that out. So, there's other partners, the county, highway department, county public works, county soil and water conservation district. There's a multitude of knowledge structures, knowledge bases that are out there, and funding sources to tap into.
So how do we get out of your way then? Because I know we've gone and you and I have walked properties and we've looked at other places, and it's always the discussion of, well, it's in the town, but it affects the city, or it's on that border. And it's always the discussion of authority, territory, whether we have our own turf or we get territorial or whatever, I don't know. But how do we remove all that
give you the authority to act and present and know that you'll get support on both sides and you're not gonna wonder if you're gonna have support from one and not support from the other. And vice versa, because that's the gist of everything that we need to come down to, because we can talk about there, because I agree with everything that this is, this is it. I mean, we could have left half an hour ago and gone with that, but until you know that you have buy-in from the town board and the city council to back you on that, I think we're gonna hit some of the same roadblocks.
Well, I guess in my 23 years of working here, I've never felt that, and I definitely with this group, I don't feel that. So I'm not, and
Okay,
again,
good.
the last word that should be coming out of my mouth is I. Because this is really a team effort. I'm doing a lot of talking tonight, but I mean, without this guy, I ain't getting nothing. I have a computer and a hand shovel. So it's, it literally, that's,
And I hear you don't even use that at home either.
exactly. That's right. So, actually, July 9th, Ann was digging a swale to get the flooding away from these words. So, so this, and the city's gonna play a big role in this, right? So it's gonna be money, it's gonna be those kind of things saying, yeah, we got this, but again, it's gotta be, we're gonna be bringing MRB in at some point here to help with some of the design components, right? We're gonna be bringing in soil and water, they're involved already. It's gonna be, and knowing, we gotta get these partnerships and really expanding. So money, it's budget season. Yes, I think, if we can allocate some funding towards prioritizing Sucker Brook, the thing I think the city folks have to remember, and I think this is, this was an issue in the town, but man, we had some other issues throughout the town as well in terms of flooding issues. I mean, Jim and I are we're still like, we gotta come up with that list. I mean, it's just like, it's massive, in terms of the amount of issue areas. Gorham, oh my God, I mean, there's so many freaking issues in Gorham in terms of flooding issues. So that's some of the things we definitely have to look at and understand, but I think both the city and the town have to allocate some resources, and it's not a one-time thing. I think this is really something we gotta look at and sustain.
We can jump all over it now and then forget about it in a year. Hit us again.
I'm glad you mentioned the other areas too, other than County Canandaigua and the city of Canandaigua, because some of the other townships suffered through some of the same things. And going back to the watershed and the fact that you are one of two employees of the Watershed Council. And the council is funded by all of the municipals within the county, including Canandaigua County and Canandaigua City. Does that mean that maybe increasing the allocation to the Watershed Council might be one way of tackling this in terms of the dollar?
So it's a beautiful softball, and I'd love to say absolutely yes, but I guess what I would suggest is maybe a little, and we can figure out the funding formula and look at that aspect. But I would suggest the way we've been most successful is if we're doing a project in the town, we're using, and it's gonna benefit, the town. The town is coming up with the resources to do that project. The Watershed Council comes in and helps. Technical resources, maybe some funding. We really do very well at grant funding and writing and stuff like that. But I guess I would suggest building your own budget line items within the city and the town to do this kind of work. It's less diluted, using the water theme, right? To keep it, in-house, but know that you've got commitment. And then the other thing is you have control then. I've got to come back, Jim's got to come back, we got to come back and present to you, hey, we think this is a good idea. Well, you're elected officials for a reason, right? You make the final say.
I'll say to both boards that
Yeah.
Kevin is great at finding the money. What we need though is a bank account of money to do the work until we get reimbursed. That's
Yeah.
probably one of the larger items that we need is
That's true.
money to pay for the project. You'll get it in a year-ish, but you'll get it. And I pick on Kevin because that's typically what happens. So that would be a help from both the city and the town. when they think about these projects.
Okay, but going back to the watershed council for a moment, if you said that you're also dealing with issues, say in the town of Hopewell, or, yeah, Hopewell, or in Gorham. I mean, they're probably asking you to do some things also.
Yep.
So, you know, the question becomes, do you have enough help?
We can, that's a, you know, a good discussion, maybe not right now tonight, I think it's something, you know, to look at, but it's also pulling into partnerships. So there, we've got good resource folks that can do a lot of these things as well. Yeah, more help would always be great, yes.
There hasn't been a project yet that we haven't been able to do internally with not only the city, the town staff, but other towns to help get it done. So we haven't had to go outside for contract work.
But I raise these questions knowing that there are two members sitting here today who are members of the watershed council. And certainly you're coming up with a budget process right now as the council. So it's something you want to keep in mind because you're going to have your other fellow supervisors saying, well, we've got problems, we've got problems.
We're both flush with money, just wondering where we can spend it.
Here's another truth. So to that point, you know, you've got other commitments in your job than just this, with the lake and other things, so. You know, what, I guess that's one thing you should come back to us is, what do you need? You know, what kind of help do you need to continue doing the rest of your job? And, you know, this could be a focus, but,
Yeah.
So we need, I think that's something that could come back to the board and the council is what exactly you need. And get you that help, whatever, you know, whatever it is, because I think this is gonna be, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, for me, speaking for me, for council, and I know about some other, this is a priority.
Yeah.
You know, this is gonna be our focus. And, you know, just a huge priority, so whatever you think you need, you got, you know, let us know. I know you like to tackle these things a lot with you and Jim and Jim Sprague and others, but I think, you know, you gotta let us know what help you need.
So I guess I would say some of the things we've struck out on, like we've been successful a couple times with landowners, but some of the landowners, I don't know. Maybe I didn't connect with them. We did a lot of great connections with some landowners, but maybe it's going back to some of these landowners with some different faces and saying, hey, you know, and maybe it's somebody who knows, okay, I know that person. So that might be something we can kind of figure out, you know, sort of offline a little bit, you know, so we're not, the biggest thing is, we don't wanna, we don't want to create bad blood out there. We don't want to create mistrust and oh, that person didn't do it, you know, and so that's what we're trying to look at, is trying to build those partnerships with some of the landowners that I may not know and do that. So that's when we just, you know, focusing in on Sucker Brook, that's probably a big piece of the puzzle there. And then kind of some of the design things but I think having a bank account that we can, but it goes back to the town board, it goes back to the city. That's why I like it at the municipality, because it holds our feet to the fire. You are the elected officials representing the public. We're supposed to go back to you as the purse string holder and make sure we're doing the right thing. So we have to prove it. That's the way it should work.
Well, we're in the process of building our budget. We had one workshop on Monday, we got another tomorrow morning. But how much should we put in there? What's the number?
Right.
I mean, you can't answer that, not a rhetorical question, but. You know, we do have, there is some money there now.
Yeah.
In that mutual.
Yes.
So for any initial study, pull an MRB in for something. I would presume that money could be tapped to do some of that work.
Right.
That's with a question mark at the end of it, but not knowing what we're up against is difficult to say, okay, we'll put this much in this line item for.
Can we still add to that fund? Are we able to add to it at this point? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something we have to pass
Yeah.
rezos or whatever to.
Just
add
gotta
every
find
time.
it.
Yeah, I know, I'm just wondering if we could, it's a capital project, right?
Sucker Brook, yeah, Steve.
Yeah, but I'd like you to think about all the little things you do that don't require the expertise you have, but take up your time. And think about how we can find somebody to do those things for you. And I've been in your office, I've worked with you on projects. I don't know how you do it. You have more bosses than anybody. And if you could really take some time and think about, what if I didn't have to do A, B, and C and somebody else is doing that? I think you'd find efficiencies and find the right person. And it can change your life. I had the right person working for me when I was superintendent of schools. I would have not lasted 15 minutes without that person. So it can change your life.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I don't have time to think about it.
She's not available.
Yeah, well, this is. I really wanna make sure, you know, there's so many people involved in this, right? I'm the focal point for, you know, because this is my job, right? This is what I do, but there's a lot of people who are heavily involved in this. And that's something maybe Jim and I and Jim Sprague, you know, we can kind of, you know, pull those folks in more often and make sure we're spreading the burden out a little bit on doing these things, you know. I remember when I did the presentation to the city, Bill Wright was there for the Washington Street reason, right? But Washington, yeah, so, but he came up to me, he's like, no, let me know what you need. You know, so the county is gonna be a big player, and, you know, Dan Rago from County Highway, so there's a lot of good folks that are involved in this.
So it seems like we have our task. And from the sounds of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to speak for anybody else. Are we comfortable, it seems like it, with Kevin identifying, I think you should identify who you would like to have as your point, whether it be at the city or the town, to work with on that, to help prioritize these projects and then bring them back to us.
I guess what I would suggest is let's, you know, we got a core group between Jim Sprague, Jim Fletcher, and myself.
So that's your,
and, you know.
so that's your.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the time grants work through the city council, am I correct?
We've done some through Gorham, we've done some through the town.
Yeah, but for the most part.
Yep,
The money
and just
part,
because our
whereas-
accounting system
Right.
is, you know, at the city, so it just makes it easier that
Just
way.
makes it easier, okay.
Well, I would think that our city manager would certainly be a part of this.
Yep.
And I would assume Doug Finch would also be a part of it.
But the
Because-
people doing the real.
Well, the
we're gonna
people,
Do this stuff, and this guy.
it's the three of them.
No, but I mean, they're the people, at least in our situation, as far as the money is concerned, we go to him.
You know, Alan, when they both get in the room together, sometimes it's tough to squeeze money out.
They make
But if
the
they know
law.
it's a priority,
Some good managers, right?
That's right.
but if they know it's a priority.
I know, I just,
Speaking of the money, he didn't answer Terry's question on how much.
No,
uh,
I quite honestly, one of the things, you know, maybe it's a placeholder. I think what I said to you was, you know, and again, it gets us ready, you know, in that 150 range, you know, that then gets you ready for FEMA. That you have the local match set up, right? Or if an opportunity pops this winter, you know, this fall, where all of a sudden the landowner says, you know what, okay, I'm good with that 10 acres. You know, and it's farmland, so it's 10, 11,000 an acre potentially. You know, but it's key, you know, we've done the evaluation, we've walked it. We've really looked at it, we've been out there during storm events, you know, it makes sense. Then it's like, then we got the resource, then it's not waiting a month or two to town board meetings, stuff like that. Yeah, we still gotta go back, you know, to get approval on the land purchase, but we can say, yes, we have money to do this. You know, and it speeds up the process, like when you guys have the open space fund, there's a property you wanna do. You have the money on hand to make it.
So should we take that number if it's 150 grand that's there now? And perhaps agree to keep it topped up to that number on an annual basis, or?
I guess what I would suggest is add to it, and then we really gotta figure out FEMA.
You're
You
gonna
know,
draw it down.
yeah,
Be
yeah.
replenished.
Yeah,
Because it helps to have a number.
When I talked to Kevin, he said, why don't you put in 150 each, so that 150 we already have.
Yeah.
Is now almost a $500,000.
Yes, yeah, then you got, then.
You go first.
That's right.
We're in this together, Terry. But that's the number that I asked Kevin for budget purposes, because, you know, you guys are ahead of us in the process, but that's something we're gonna be in.
Yeah. I would say when I'm financial chairman, Dr. You've been asked for us to write down our priorities the other day in the finance committee. We each wrote them down without looking at the other answers. Overwhelming, the majority, number one thing was to solve the flooding problem in Suffolk Brook. So right now, I'm reading the tea leaves. That's John's favorite thing to say, that we're all in on this to try to solve the problem financially.
And let's remember something, that the beauty of what the town and the city do, in my opinion, is we're not contracting out, right? So that's a cash contribution. And then it's, you know, if we had to rent out, you know, a machine, you know, for say 3 or 4 weeks, because we're doing, you know, a couple big projects, you're at, you know, $100 an hour, you know, for that machine. So there's a huge cost savings in having the equipment. And maybe, quite honestly, Jim and I have talked about this a lot, is maybe getting a machine, and maybe there's donations that could come in. There's, you know, private funding, whatever, that could help support this. But getting an excavator dedicated, especially in the summer months, he's got all his machines cranking a lot of times. I make, well, Thursday afternoon from 12 to 4, what do you think? All right, it's fine, you know? So it's, you know, maybe having that type of equipment where that's kind of the key one. The dozer, I think, is a little bit more available, but it's more of a finishing dozer. But we typically don't need the big dozer very often, except when we're doing the big projects. So let's rent that. But the excavator does the stream work and do a lot of the other things that we need to do. So that's something I think, as we triage things, maybe it's having that equipment all the time would be huge. But I don't know if either one of us are completely sold on that, but we think it's a good idea worthy of exploring. So that would be something to look at, because then all of a sudden, you know, what you guys did with Kenny, Rocket, there's another, you know, Kenny does a great job for us, you know, and, you know, he's pretty readily available, and, you know, he does a really good job. Like, we've used them in Gorham a couple times this year. We did a project with no cash cost, and we took 14 acres of like a lot of runoff coming off of a landscape, major runoff, and got it into a stormwater pond that we built. And the landowner allowed us to do is actually Dale Stell. It was a great partnership. I went to him, I said, listen, we really need you. He's like, it's fine, take the crops down, I see the point, I'll let you do it. We were able to do it, and we cranked out this project, and I went up there during a couple storm events, and the water was cranking off areas off of his site, not on his land, but off of his land, through there into the stormwater pond that was otherwise flooding downstream areas. So those are things like it'd be tough to prioritize that, say, yes, that's in our list, that's number 2.3 on our list. But it happened, we were able to pull it together. But having an excavator readily available would be a big thing.
I will admit that you guys have been very creative in how you approach some of these projects, and you usually come together on them. I know that familiar with using Ken Brackett on it.
Yep.
I mean, those are the kind of things that, you know, mitigate the cost.
Oh,
While
huge.
getting the job done,
Yeah.
so that's
Probably
great.
typically it's about a quarter of the cost if we're doing it in-house. The FLCC project, which has worked awesome, that we were able to reimburse the town with the state grant funding $100,000. You know, so we were able to reimburse for pretty much most of the equipment usage and most of the labor that was out there. And that has yielded huge public benefits on many of these storms.
I mean, as I'm sitting here, Kevin, listening to this, I'm not hearing you asking for money. I'm hearing you asking for understanding of this plan and what the needs are, and trying to work on these bullets that you have down here, keep chipping away at them. But it sounds to me like 99% of the property that we need to get this 100-acre plan, we need to get buy-in from our neighbors. And what I'm hearing you ask for is maybe there's other people that know some of these neighbors that could reach out and help convince these neighbors that we need their help. That's what I'm hearing you say, because you illustrated two, I would say, more of the immediate areas that we could just create by creating berms. But what we need is the neighbors that say that they're willing to let us do this. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so that's Cause I struck out with one of the landowners on that one on County Road 32, it just. Maybe it was too early in the process, he had just bought the land, and I don't wanna go through names and stuff like that, and it was just like, no, he wasn't taking my calls anymore.
Right.
And I called him a lot.
We
so,
might need money
Yeah,
to encourage some of these neighbors to let us use these areas as mitigation areas, but we don't know that yet. That's kind of a,
Well, that's a
you
last
can't look in
resort.
the crystal ball, right? We gotta get out and talk to these people, or someone needs to get out and talk to these people and ask for their help.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm hearing, and
So,
Bring it home.
any other thoughts?
can I
I
just,
think Bob should be
Yeah.
in charge now.
Yeah, I started, you bring.
can I just point something out? I
Yeah.
feel like this is the task force, okay? We don't need to meet every other week, all that kind of stuff, and have another committee that, my suggestion is. It's, I'll be routing back, I report directly, I come to your meetings when you get me to, we can give periodic updates. We can try that for 3-4 months, let's see where we get, we really are gonna get a lot more information. Once we go down the track with FEMA. That then is gonna, and it's it's maybe a little bit late in the time frame, but. You guys may be looking late at your budget and saying, oh, we gotta put a little bit more money in because it's 75% federal, but it's 25% local, right? So that we'll know a lot more, I think, within a month as to, wow, they're willing to do a bridge. Yeah, think about that. Is that the right thing to do? Do we have the money in the budget to do a bridge in the city? The 25% cost, we gotta hire an engineering firm to do that, all that kind of stuff. Those kind of things. Oh, wow. This landowner has finally said, yes, we can do this project, but it's gonna be a hefty chunk of change to build it. So,
Kevin, to build on that
Yeah.
comment that you're making there. We all know how the state and the feds move in terms of processes.
Yeah.
So even if they were to come back and say, yes, we're willing to do this, but what we need is a 25% or 50%, whatever that number is, match from the city or the town in order to execute this. That's a process that's gonna take a few months at minimum, right? So
yes, yeah,
we just gotta be prepared to react, is what I'm hearing you say.
right.
Should FEMA come to us and say, yes, we're willing to do this, that's the first step. And then we can go and strategize how we can finance what piece of it we need to finance.
Yeah, so I guess you guys have, and I think, the town does have, open space funds and there's some other pieces you can pull in. To kind of make that happen, but I guess I would suggest to be more shovel ready, if you will, is having the finances in place. So that if FEMA's verbally told, the crew, that's involved, yes, they want to do mitigation projects, they want to fund. So
Mitigation.
It sounds to me from the town's perspective. Not just throw aside for future conversation, we just kind of need to have some unassigned funds ready to address some of these more immediate needs that might pop up in the future as a result of some of these occurrences,
And we might,
whatever they may be.
we might also need to look at our structure of what we do with the monies that we take in, the parks fund, and monies that go there.
Absolutely.
We need some of that can go to mitigation. So those are discussions that we can have, but we need to be nimble.
Now that, exactly, now that we've heard that, we've had this conversation, I mean, we need to go and look at the budget and just make sure that we are.
And the beauty of like the town and the city, you can, advertise it. You can bring in, make sure we get the public feedback, which I think you need to get tonight instead of me talking. So that you're hearing directly from them, and anything that we're spending public money on, you have to give the okay.
That Joe kind of without saying, yeah, I agree with her.
When FEMA agrees to fund something,
7 years.
they say yes. How many years,
No,
months is it before you see the?
that 23 of them so far, it's not terrible. No, it's within a year.
Is it a year?
So it depends on the size of your project and depending on how long it takes, there's two different categories. So there's that 1 year period that you're gonna get things fixed and they'll pay for it. There's another category that you're gonna be following that, let's say, I'll use West Gibson Bridge, okay, that. You identify that this has become an issue. It's gonna be a 3-year project for us to get there. They will then keep that case open to fund that project. It's not like a one and done. I'm not sure if you or John has FEMA met with you yet. So you got 60 days from that meeting, put all your stuff together to see what you want. After those 60 days, if you don't have it in there, better have a good reason why you should have it. Because they're gonna be done.
Does that start from the meeting on the 28th for
Yes.
you? Okay, so I don't know if you've had the follow-up meeting yet.
No, it started last week.
Okay, okay.
But then we're having a walkthrough,
We're gonna do discussing Thursday, then we do a
they're doing a
walkthrough.
walkthrough with you and us.
This is the time to put anything you could think of in the pot.
Put the worst case,
Correct.
worst case, everything in there.
Yep.
But the PA funds are more to deal with the damage that occurred on that day.
Right.
The mitigation portion of it, there had to be a relationship to the damage that occurred on July 9th. There is going to be a separate pot of funds after the PA that's specifically for hedge mitigation, completely separate from this program.
Right.
So not all of our eggs are in this basket.
But we can prove that, you know, like the bridge and, you know, the choke points at the bridges, you know, cause some of the problem. Right.
FEMA was born yesterday either.
Yeah.
So we have to be reasonable, we have to be able to prove these things. And that, you know, any reasonable third parties can look at it and say, yeah, they're not telling fit.
So do we hire outside engineers to show, I mean, you showed the flood points and the choke points. What more do they need to prove that point?
I think that's the discussion you have with FEMA, and I can be part of that and go through and say, all right, what's the level of engineering analysis you need? We have the study that shows those two bridges especially are way undersized. I think in the 10-year storm that they're 10 or 25-year storm that they're at capacity. And then after that, they begin to flood. So we have the engineering study that documents that, and now we're showing that there was flooding damage in that area and the water was over, like the one picture, right? The water's over top of the bridge, right? So that's, and again, I don't think yes, if you just change one bridge, you're just pushing the problem downstream, right? So it's gotta be a holistic approach of, yes, we're doing upstream mitigation, we're looking at downstream bridges, maybe it's, 2 or 3 of them. And making sure you're not all of a sudden creating a problem somewhere else.
And if we open this up, we still got smaller ones down.
The nice thing about your bridges, it sounds weird, but there's not a lot of storage behind them. So the big thing that they look at with bridges is, all right, if it's a choke point, is it storing water behind? But in this case, really, it's just overtopping, so it's really not gonna.
Basements are the.
Yes. Yeah.
I do wanna add, just to reiterate though, because we do have we do have private residents and people in here. The comment of the 1 or 2 year comment for reimbursement quickly. That doesn't always happen though. Because I think the Binghamton flood just got reimbursed from 2017. So there's some other flood areas that just got flood reimbursement. So just putting it out there that it's not a guarantee. Sometimes things take time. It depends when the money's released and other things. Just for full disclosure and have everything out there on the table for people. It's not, unfortunately, it's easier for municipalities to get the reimbursement than it is for others to get the reimbursement. That's just the way the system works. On that cheery note. So, we had the resolution supporting the decisions, the task force. I heard Kevin, you mentioned that this is kind of it. And I think, Terry really wants to have more meetings and more committees, but I think I'll go against what his wishes are at this point in time.
I'm retired, I got time.
So I think if we do keep it with consistent reports, do you want something from us, just speaking for the town board, and I'll let the mayor speak for the city council, do you want something from us as a town, a resolution in support of your next steps of anything, or are you comfortable? We've had this discussion. we're all brought up to speed. We move forward as is.
Well, let's define as is, and I think it's important, and I think before you, I would highly suggest you hear from the public. And I definitely would say to the public, we always have an open door, people, like I meet with residents and we look at these kind of things. I really think, I don't wanna be the single point person. I really think it's maybe the three of us in terms of Jim Fletcher, myself and Jim Sprague, as kind of the key staff folks to report back to city management, town management. And
Because you're the boots on the ground.
Yep, and do it that way, and then, because there's good direct lines, like I report to. You and the mayor, and then, Jim Fletcher reports to the town board, but connects with the town manager, and then Jim Sprague reports right to John, so. I think that's a good network for now, and I think we have to make sure, though, we're not working in isolation. Where we present to the public, maybe we have a follow-up public meeting somewhere in the November, December timeframe to say, hey, here's where we're at now. Here's what we've learned from FEMA, here's the eligible projects, here's some of the progress, hey, we got another project in the books that we're gonna be building. And then we get a feedback loop from the public. So I definitely would say, let's make sure we don't forget the public and we wrap them back in to get feedback on what's going on. There's a lot of knowledge out there. So that's what I would suggest, to make sure we do a dedicated meeting somewhere in November.
So maybe a quarterly.
Yeah.
Quarterly or something, so we're keep up to speed for the next little bit, so it doesn't get lost in the cracks. And I also like what you said with not in isolation, because sometimes we do have that tendency to put our heads down and worry about our little area. But really, it's a bigger picture, and we've got to communicate. We have to share ideas, we've got to share concerns. We have to keep that line of communication open. That's one thing that we learned through this whole event, is that from the onset, we've got to be talking and chattering back and forth. I'll let you bring us home, Mr. Mayor.
No, I think that, as far as Salford, that we brought up, pounded a resolution, I think we should do the same with the support. Kevin and whatever, group we put together already has, and, we support them, and then when we get the budget time, I think we should have what I call it, a slush fund or emergency fund of, some pool money, and it's a placeholder. So if something does come up, we can, that that's dedicated to that. I know there's something, my favorite thing is kick the can down the road, which we do every year, but we may have to do that again to make sure that this is a priority, which we all agree in the council that is, this is a priority. Quarterly meetings are probably fine unless there's something that comes up and you need to come to a council meeting or, come to a town meeting with anything that's, in 2 weeks we can do this, or we need this, quick. I've talked to all, our state and federal reps that they just want to be kept in the loop where we are, what we're doing. So things that are a surprise to them. The other thing I think we ought to do, maybe a separate group is one, you mentioned that, when this happened, we caught off guard, where we, for housing, for generators, or get, working with RG&E and NYSEG and things like that, that maybe we have, an emergency action plan that if this comes up again, just open the book, these are boom, 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 what we have to do, these are the numbers that we have to call, things like that, but did pull it together. Everybody did great. The agencies that came in did a great job. So we, I just think there should, we should look at that emergency action plan as well.
Almost like an event like this with both, because I know there was some. We got better in the beginning, a few hours were a little bit rough.
Yeah.
Kind of knowing everything that was happening and hearing mixed message, just hearing messages about what was happening, what was set up, what wasn't set up. So we have those channels open.
To that end, Ontario County really took the lead on this emergency. And Krista Bolden's team did fantastic. They had an after action meeting.
7 o'clock the next morning.
Was it Monday?
It was Monday, Monday we had
These days blend together real quick. And so some of these issues were already brought up and discussed at the county level. It's much more appropriate to do that at the county level. These disasters don't happen in isolation. They don't happen in just Canandaigua. They happen widespread. So having those, the county has an emergency management position, which happened to be vacant during this. And then there were some other vacant positions. So you know, that didn't help, but I think the county is aware of it.
I would say Deb was there from the moment it started.
Well, Deb Tricky was there, you know, she's the EMS coordinator, she wasn't, you know, but she has done a fantastic job, I don't wanna take that away from her, thank you, Jared. But, the county is replacing the emergency manager, I'm on that interview panel, helping that selection. So a lot of those emergency plans, especially regarding the housing, is something the county is gonna focus on and discuss. Jim, you were at the meeting, did I miss anything in that?
No, it was, kind of like what we're doing here today. Forward thinking for communities we live in to be better prepared for a situation like this.
You had another.
Man, I just don't want to be sitting here next year.
No, none of us, no.
I mean, I know that sounds trite, but we have to make this priority every single day and every meeting. Everything we do, every decision we make has to be focused on the biggest threat that we're facing as a community. And I think this is only one example of what we're facing. This could happen 2 or 3 times in one season. So being prepared for it and being able to respond to it and getting the work done that we all understand needs to get done has to be everybody.
We have time if the.
We do have
wants
one more.
another privilege.
We do have a final privilege of the floor on the agenda.
Wants to speak.
So there is a microphone. There are people online that it's easier for them to hear. We are supposed to have mics that pick us up, but I don't know if they always.
Good evening. I'm Corinne Knupp. I live in the city at Holiday Harbor. And I have a question about FEMA. Does an event such as we experienced on July 9th cause FEMA to relook at its floodplains and the maps and their designations of what's a low, moderate, and a high risk area? I personally am not in a high risk area, yet on July 9th, I had some pretty frightening moments. Thank you.
I would add to that, the bitter irony of this is the same week that this happened, our flood maps showed up, the updated floodplain maps. And FEMA is relooking at all of that, and they look at everything. They don't just look at one specific event, they look at a series of events, they map it, they track it, and then they issue a new floodplain, and it is now. I'm drawing a blank on when the meetings are coming up, but there are meetings, there are public workshops about the flooding and the flood issues, and you know. There will be representatives for flood insurance and how to try to help flood proof your residents and all these other things that you can do, and it's more of a public workshop. It will, that would be on the county website. I don't have the date in my head.
Place locally?
Yes,
Yeah, and those.
Throughout the county.
Those draft FEMA maps are on Encore, and the
Yes.
county, the GIS map, at least in the city, they were pretty darn accurate. from what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, they were.
yeah.
Anyone else?
I'm Ernie Myrani. I live on West Avenue, so people are affected by the obviously. And I like everything I'm hearing tonight. People are all engaged, you want to do the right thing, and I appreciate that. However, the one thing that we're missing here is there were 200 homes that were affected. And we're sort of nowhere. There was really no help. I mean, people that helped actually, I know the city came, they did all the cleanup, which was great. But who helped me it was the Team Rubicon. It was the Latter-day Saints come in and took all my appliances that were shot, took them out. But there's no other help available. Not that we're looking for handouts in any of these neighborhoods, but the problem is, and Kevin came up with it, there's 23 miles of stream, and where does it all end up? It comes out of Woodlawn Cemetery, goes into the school grounds, and then it hits West Gibson, West Avenue, Chapin, Bristol, and Clark Street. And we've got nowhere to go. There's nothing we can do at this point. Are there any immediate plans to alleviate some of the problems we have? Doesn't sound like it. But I know from Gibson Street down to West Avenue Bridge, that could be dredged. Anything would help. And some spots, it's maybe only a foot deep. In some spots, it's 2.5, 3 feet. By the time it hits the West Avenue Bridge, it doesn't overflow the bridge, but it hits the bridge and then it backs up into the property there. There's a big parcel of land back there. And then we all got flooded. And I know we can't do something there to stop that because then it's gonna hurt somebody going down the line. Something's gotta be done here. It's not fair to the neighbors and all those houses. And West Gibson Street, I think they got it worse than anybody. And it was sad. I mean, I was over there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there were boats going up and down the street rescuing people. So what can be done to alleviate some of these problems and help us? Because unfortunately, this is happening worldwide. It's not just here that it happened. And this wasn't even a whole area rain event. It was 5 inches here, 2 inches there. What if it had been 5 inches in the whole area and that 23 miles of stream? It might not have been 200 houses. It might have been 400. It might have been 600. You got a serious problem for the neighbors, and I think somehow that's got to be addressed. Thank you.
I think that's one thing I addressed tonight was where the pinch points are, where the, where the, the points that need to be fixed, be looked at. And I, like with Kevin saying, these things are, fortunately, could be years in the making. But, this is the start. This is where we address it. We're not gonna let it go.
I certainly appreciate it. There's no question, but we can't afford it to replace these things year after year. You can only afford so much insurance. And once these new floodplain maps go through, I wasn't in a floodplain. Now I'm gonna be in a floodplain when the new map takes it. So those rates for that flood insurance, they double and triple. In addition to the regular insurance you got here. But some of it falls under sewage and seepage, and some of it falls into flood. And they're a little different, so you have to cover yourself all different ways. You run out of money at some point. And there's no help. I mean, that thing that came from Oakville was a joke. It was a total joke. And
We are
the only
trying
people
to-
that actually qualified for that would have been people that couldn't afford a home house.
Were there many people in the city who qualified?
No, one.
Likewise, no,
One house.
yeah, we're in the
saying
same.
that, talked to Senator Helming the other day that they're, this is amazing, saying that they didn't I don't know who they were, figured out somebody, higher up, didn't realize it didn't cover tenants. Didn't realize it didn't cover tenants. So now we're going back to, still trying to get something, but, how to process that is, so still working on that. And that's why they want to be kept in the loop, especially where we are, and still some feedback. Everything's been great. Just keep on pushing.
And I think we had one as well, the town.
Mr. Hartwell.
I couldn't hear him, so I'll stay back here and everybody can hear me. I got a little pet peeve. I had a long talk with Kevin and we discussed it, and I heard some keywords tonight, pinch point, jam, obstruction. And there was a jam on Gelina at a pinch point. And I think, just personally, from being there and seeing it all, that contributed heavily to the damage on West Gibson Street. Because the jam was at the pedestrian bridge and on the school property. And I watched it, I saw it, it went down, and then it went right back down West Gibson Street and right down my driveway and through the backyard, back into Sucker Brook. So this morning, I spent some time with the crossing guard at the entrance to the Pearl Street entrance to the elementaries. And I was there for the whole time. And during that whole time, one girl, student, came down the east side of Pearl Street, crossed West Gibson Street, all by herself. Nobody was helping her, and that was busier than busy this morning. So then she gets onto the school property and walks across the grass all the way over to the driveway, where the crossing guard helped her get across the driveway, and then she went on her way across the pedestrian bridge to the school. One student. So it's, you know, we talk about pinch points and jams and stuff and eliminating obstructions. When maybe Mayor Palomini or Dr. Ewing can bring it back, but it was like 25 years ago, maybe, that they built that bridge, that footbridge. It hasn't been there forever, it wasn't there when I went to that school. And I said at the time, why? Why are they building this footbridge here? The roadway was already there with a road bridge and people used to walk across that. But obviously they're using it for emergency purposes, and there's people picking up their kids using that driveway. But why the pedestrian bridge? You look across the street, there's two houses. Two houses. From West Gibson to the other side of the of Sucker Brook Bridge. There's a sidewalk on the other end by the administration building, and there's West Gibson Street sidewalk that can go up to the West Gibson Street entrance and can be gone in there. So that footbridge is absolutely unnecessary. And that's where the jam was. And it's right at where the East Branch meets Sucker Brook. So it's a big intersection of two major tributaries, and they built a footbridge across it that, just by looking at it, to me, isn't big enough. But I talked to Kevin and he said that it was.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay then.
I said I was gonna measure it.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
All right. Did you?
Yes,
Okay.
so
Is it?
it's,
You talked about the West Gibson Street Bridge not being big enough.
right,
If that's not big enough, that pedestrian bridge can't be big.
so that bridge, if I'm remembering correctly, the problem with that right now is it's about 3.5 feet in height to the H beams that support that footbridge, right? It is 27 feet roughly in width, so it's getting close. It's slightly less in terms of what the Gibson Street Bridge provides overall. But what I want to do and talk to Mike McLean and talk to the school about is there's another bridge that services the East Branch, if you will, in terms of the pedestrian, like it hits a pinch point, then it's the East Branch that's coming through, that's about the same square footage going through. What I want to look to do is see if we can lower the walking trail that leads up to that. So if we get a jam there, can it jump and overflow to the East Branch one to be able to take that? So the combination of those two bridges exceed the driving bridge that goes to the school. Those two in combination definitely exceed in terms of capacity. It's just you gotta be able to get over to get the flow over there. So that's one we're definitely looking at, for sure.
Because
Absolutely.
you didn't mention it, it wasn't in the PowerPoints, and that's the only reason I said anything,
Yeah.
because we
No,
talked.
no, absolutely.
And I just didn't want you to forget.
That's why it's an
that,
open door. Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's where the
that's right.
jam was.
Yes.
And that's what caused
Yes.
a lot of problems.
Well, I guess what I would,
Not all of them by any means.
if it's okay with the boards, but what I would say to you on that is the pictures at the West Gibson Street Bridge and the pictures of that overall area, that entire zone, both sides were just completely flooding through. Even if that bridge was not even there, the pedestrian bridge was not even there, that whole system was just gonna be flooding through both sides during that. But I think there's smaller storms. The other big thing is we have a big wood load up in, Woodlawn Cemetery trees or whatever, a riparian corridor where trees fall down that could come through and get debris jam there. So we have to look at mitigation factors there and see, can we pop that bridge up higher? That I think may be FEMA eligible. But that's what we have to have those discussions on and see if we can get that bridge to match the other one, which is about 5 feet in height.
But the point is, it's unnecessary.
I think that's a school decision. The school's gotta figure out their safety factors and what they think is
They
necessary.
referred me to Mr. Goodwin.
I'll circle
That
back,
went nowhere.
I'll circle back with the school and we're gonna have those discussions. Yes,
All right, you got another chart, you got another job.
that's right.
You're gonna bring in Jamie Farr and,
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk to those guys and we'll figure it out.
thanks, Jim.
Okay, Maria, I think.
Yep. I'll also speak from here. It's Maria Bucci from West Gibson Street, City Canandaigua. So, first I just want to thank you all for doing this. Kevin has been great, very accessible. He met with some of us last week, because we had questions after his presentation. I think as we move forward, there definitely needs to be a level of accountability, because I've heard a lot of great ideas, and I've heard commitment from both city and town elected representatives that, this is a priority. I think we as citizens need to hold you all accountable. So I would really appreciate having some follow-up sessions to sort of see where we're going with all of this, because I know that there's gonna be a lot of work that's gonna have to be done. I love that image of the watershed. And I would just ask all of you elected officials, and then please communicate this, especially to your planning groups, both at the city, town, and county level, that any discussion of future development needs to be made with the lens of that larger watershed. Because if all you're doing is looking at the rules and regs within an isolated site and not taking into consideration the impacts on the entire watershed, then you're failing in your duty. So that would be, one of the things that I would really ask that you just keep that in mind, that every decision you make going forward, really think about that image of the watershed and the decisions that you're making and how it impacts not just the people who live along Sucker Brook, but our entire community, and then the impact on the lake, which is just such the heartblood of this region. Also, I just want to mention I know the folks from Happiness House were also there last week. There was an invitation to citizens to attend the county's hazard mitigation plan update. One of the things that really concerned me in that presentation was that when the county first did their plan in 2018, there were jurisdictions in the county that did not approve the plan, which meant that applications to FEMA and other grant programs would not be funded. So I think all of you as elected officials really need to put some pressure on your fellow elected representatives at the county level to make sure that this plan update gets approved by every jurisdiction in the county. Because without that blanket approval, all those grant opportunities go away. And so I think that needs to be, I really wanted to say that tonight, because that was made clear to us who attended that meeting. And that was a surprise to me. First of all, it was a surprise that the 2018 plan was not approved by all jurisdictions. And then it was a surprise to hear that applications would be denied without that approval. So I think that's like super important. I hope everyone here fills out that survey. I mean, I think all of these next steps need to be in that survey. We need all of it. Like, I'm gonna put every single one of those bullet items in my survey response, and that's what I would invite the rest of you to do. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Anybody else in the room? We do have one person online. Maston?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you all, and I'll keep this brief. I am down on County Road 16, which I understand is not the main thrust of this group here. But I wanted to see, based on all the discussion I've heard today, or rather maybe encourage that, similar to the lady who was just speaking, this watershed is a lot broader than just red lines on a map. And so I was wondering what plans are there to involve the county as well in some of these conversations, because changes made at elevations higher to the lake sort of naturally impact the water flow coming down to the lake. And I know that there are hundreds of homes between Butler and really up to the town and city that were impacted in a relatively dramatic way during these last couple storms. And again, I recognize that might be sort of county responsibility, but as long as we're bringing a lot of smart people and attention to this issue, I'm wondering what plans there are to involve the county in some of this, to potentially unlock other funding mechanisms or whatever it might be to address these concerns more holistically.
So I know that Kevin has met with county, you've met with Bill, you've met with others about the issues. I know as a watershed council, we have discussed, because we're really a lot of the areas that have been impacted by this, we've discussed it. I brought the idea up to a handful of supervisors. It wasn't really received positively to create a group to look at and highlight areas within the county. Just to be honest, so because the feeling is that a lot of it's getting done at the local level. Am I correct in this? Because I didn't get a lot of positive feedback from bringing a larger group together, because I know you and I have talked about this as well.
Yeah, hopefully the person can hear me.
I can, yeah, thank you.
So I think when you look at, say, County Road 16, right? So the drainage that's coming down, the role of county highway or any highway department, DOT, when it's state roads, their job is to convey the water underneath their road, get it from one side to the other. Would you agree?
Right.
That's the base responsibility of highway departments, right? So County Road 16, their job is to upsize culverts, those kind of things at a base level to get the flow underneath the road. The county, I think, has been really good, but a lot of the jurisdictional responsibility, if you will, not jurisdictional responsibility, but a lot of the work that we're looking to do is up in the middle Cheshire Road area, is Butler Road area. So really it's a combination of factors that go into play. One of the things we did do, it's worked well over many of these storm events, near the Menteith Creek area, just south of Menteith, was we worked with landowners in partnership to do permanent land cover changes up above County Road 16 that really reduced the need to change out a culvert that was going to be very costly for the county to have to do. And the county played a big role in helping to make that happen. Dual Road is another good example of a combination. Really, the town did all the work out there, where we've got the town did a 2-tier detention basin that works during most of these storm events to really stop it from overtopping County Road 16, which it was, and it was wiping out Dual Road as well. So the town did that work. So sir, if there's areas that you're looking at specifically, maybe get a hold of Jim Fletcher. Don't call me, just call Jim. You can call either one of us, and we'll definitely respond to you. Maybe we can meet and figure out, where specifically you want to look at more closely.
I appreciate that. Can you give me your name real quick? Oh, just because I'm not in the room, and who is speaking now?
Yep, Kevin Ovani, and then 396-3630. That's our direct line. That's
Well, I really appreciate all y'all's hard work and dedication on this issue. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Donna Torrance. I live on County Road 16. I used to live on Westlake Road.
But you moved?
Yeah, no, I've been there over 100 years. And right now I'm at the point where I'm considering leaving. I came in when we had the 100-year storm, and I provided my pictures. I became one of the people that went to the drainage committee meetings, and so Jim Fletcher happened, and I mean, it was wonderful. Time went by, and other areas were getting worked on. No one ever came. I live 3 houses away from Maston, so I thought being involved with the drainage committee meeting would be a benefit. It did as far as meeting people, but Nothing ever happened around my home. I get terrible runoff from the yacht club. And it doesn't come from across the road, it comes right at an angle. And now this year, we've had 3 storms. And now in my life, I have a structural engineer. I mean, I don't feel that that is right. You know, one of the last things I said on my last meeting was, I said to Jim, I'd like to be feeling like a farmer and saying, come on in and clean out these side things. Start there, you know, and then change everything. But not one thing was done in all these years. 2 weeks ago, a shovel came in and cleaned out the gutters across from the house.
Oh, that was the county.
I sat right there and watched him, and he's waving at me, and I'm like, yeah, you know, you and I got something going here. That was the first time that something was done. And my guess is cleaning out those gutters are not going to affect my situation. And just saying you have to, I didn't, you know, have happen what a lot of these people are talking about. But I've put in my time. And I'd like something done for people, or I don't want to have to leave. And that's where, I mean, the structural engineer, you know, we're in thousands with that. I'd like to see something done. And ask people, you know, I thought going to those drainage meetings was gonna, and we were in a little room. I was shoulder to shoulder with Kevin and Jim. I mean, we were all like right there. It wasn't like this.
I think a lot of the issue is it's on private property. Spending public money on private property is usually frowned upon. And there's no easements over to do the work. I mean, we documented all the issues. The issue is a lot of it is on private property. How do we control the drainage off of it before it gets to your property? Like, I just can't pick up one day and go start digging around above you on private property. I understand what you're saying. And we did spend a lot of time in those meetings documenting the issues, but some issues we just can't fix without people giving up an easement, purchasing property, or a drainage district.
But you own so far into somebody's lawn, right? Or somebody does.
Usually 30 feet from the edge center of the road. On average, 30 feet. And your road is actually owned by the county, not the town. But beyond that, we have no, unless it's a drainage district, that you pay the town or the city a separate fee on your tax bill every year. Or there's been something in writing of an easement to allow a public entity to enter private property to maintain some sort of a drainage system on the property. There's gonna be something written and put into the deed.
So it would be every home on the west side of Westlake Road would need to sign an easement on the front of their property.
That's when you need a drainage district. If you're talking multiple homes, the town would have to create a drainage district. They'd have to assess you so much per year to maintain that. That honestly is something that the town doesn't have enough people to do. Just to maintain a drainage district that size along Westlake Road, there'd be a completely separate division to maintain that year in and year out. That those residents alone be responsible for paying. it would be a town-wide cost to everybody, because they're not benefiting from those who in that district would benefit from it only, you would pay them.
One of the things like, this is where it gets difficult, because we literally have, quite honestly, hundreds of these kind of smaller, bigger issues. They're not small to you, right? It's your house, right? So, but we have 109,000 acres of drainage area, hundreds of miles of streams that are draining and ultimately getting into the lake. So a lot of these are, we try to really guide the landowner, try to figure out, okay, can you increase the opening next to your house? There's some, we've got a few in Gorham that are just, we don't know what to do. Because literally it's like stream, it's way, you know, the building patterns were way too close to the stream systems, and there's no room for the stream to get out into its floodplain when it needs to. So that's where some of these are just intractable, you know, to really figure out a solution that's gonna work in that area. So I'm glad you got a structural engineer. Hopefully they're connected with a civil engineer. If they got ideas, if they're looking at the drainage area, we can help them with the drainage area. Feel free to give them my number. We can help kind of map some of that stuff out. I'm more than willing to come out and meet out there, but some of these sites, the role of government, we have to be able to show a true public benefit. Like if there was like a true like pollution issue coming in, impacting the lake that, you know, it gravitates to a level of, we got to do something about this with public funds. But some of these things are with a private benefit, or the private impact far outweighs the public impact or public benefit. And that's where it's tough for us to really get involved, you know, and be able to put public money towards that. I had one gentleman over on the east side say, okay, well, you know, it's County Road or State Route 364, and then it's about 800 feet of stream to the lake, and they literally built a house pretty much right on top of a culvert. And he said, well, you know, let's get grant money, and I want you guys to put a box culvert in, and it's all private roads and private houses from State Route 364 to the lake. I'm like, we can't, that's all private benefit, right? But I'm more than willing to come out again and look at it, you know, and we can do those kind of things and see, and meet with your structural engineer, and we can look up above, but I don't think they're in that area, it's any type of public drainage or.
Right.
Like the thing with the city uses Sucker Brook as its stormwater main conveyance system, right? So most of the 2/3 of the city streets are draining into Sucker Brook. So the city literally relies on it for its storm drainage system. So there's a public connection, a public benefit, and a public reliance on Sucker Brook to function. So putting public money towards it really works, and the town doing all the work that they're doing because of a variety of factors also makes a difference. So I know that doesn't solve your problem, but I'm more than willing to talk to the structural engineer and go through and let them know what him or her, what we have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I knew it wasn't part of this, but still, if I can help people
Yeah, that's
get
all part of
something
it.
going.
This
Thank you.
happiness house, and then we've got one in the back. Sorry, yeah, I don't remember. Your happiness house.
We just finished cleanup last week, and we're gonna start construction this week, so it's been a long road, but I did hear that there's the formation of a smaller work group. I certainly understand the efficiencies of the smaller work group, but I would encourage, if you had heard, you know, that group working on some prioritization and feedback down the road. I would encourage early engagement with the community or landowners who have a wealth of knowledge. And for our case, we're working with FEMA as well. And in looking at mitigation strategies, we would rather have a complementary plan that coincides with the town and county versus, you know, having something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jim Oktursky, 141 Park Avenue. Flood impact on July 9th was pretty profound at our house. Just want to express my gratitude towards city leadership, town leadership, Canandaigua Lake watershed. This is the right thing to do. What you're doing tonight is the right thing to do from my point of view as a resident. Sucker Brook watershed, 5,600 acres, 23 miles. In these vulnerable neighborhoods in Canandaigua, there's over 1,000 residents. We don't know what we're supposed to do. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about. We don't know what we're supposed to do in the meantime. Or if there's a 25% reduction in stormwater flow, what about the other 75% that will impact our properties? As part of the funding, as part of the priorities, I really encourage education for the vulnerable neighborhoods, so we know what to do. Flood insurance is not what we should do. We've all learned a lot about what flood insurance really covers. It is not the answer. So when there's updated maps and more people realize they're in a vulnerable place, what do? What are the actions we as private homeowners in these vulnerable neighborhoods should take? And I would love to see that as part of this whole strategy, not just focusing on stormwater wetlands and storm flows, but what private landowners in the city can do to protect our properties and do it in a coordinated way. Anything you can put toward that is going to be just as valuable as what we're doing right now.
Kevin, would you say that could include things like, what do you do if you have part of the brook going through your backyard, making sure it's clean, don't grass clip, you know, things like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are awesome, you know, from an educational standpoint, but I think, Jim, tell me if I'm wrong here, but you're talking about what can residents do to kind of increase their resiliency?
Yeah.
You know, and reduce their impacts, and that, quite honestly, that's not my area. I really would defer to, I mean, I got some ideas, but I mean, it's really that there's expertise out there that way.
That would be the county, that would be the mitigation meetings and the trainings on that, opportunities for that.
Yeah, and maybe it's, you know, maybe some of the things we could look at is bringing in, you know, a real consultant, or, you know, somebody who's got that level of knowledge that can look at and talk through, you know, retrofitting homes, you know, and looking at those kind of things, so.
I don't see any more hands online. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to be heard at this time?
I know we're ready to close. I
Yeah.
want to point out that almost every time something came up, Kevin gave his phone number out.
Yeah.
Kevin said, I'll do that. So he needs more support than he has right now. So, and I hope it's almost like a disease. I'll do it myself. You do such magnificent work. Try to find help.
You're gonna have to build an addition to the Hurley building to fit that house.
That's
That's right.
It's like change your phone number.
That's the kind of guy he is, but definitely you gotta get some.
This is not it. I appreciate it, but you know, it's, you know, the focus is trying to, you know, we're public service, right? This is what we do. So
Do it well, need the right people. Yeah. Not people.
If anybody has anything else, I think I don't know, we'll set an exact date, but we're looking at maybe mid-November sometime to bring us back together again. And then obviously in the meantime, things that come up, you know, bring them up and let us know where you're at, and what we have to do next. And we're both in our budget seasons coming up, and you guys more into it than we are, but definitely need to set in some aside.
Thank you for everybody.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Gary's always good for a motion to
You wanna bang your gavel?
No.
There you go.
Adjourn is always in order.